So hello, everyone. Can everyone hear me all right? If you can hear me, if you could give me a thumbs up or all good in the chat. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. My name is Eli McClain. I am the Building Capacity Fellow at the Museum Association of New York. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a white man wearing with long brown hair tied up in a bun. I'm wearing a light blue shirt, and behind me is a beige wall with a portrait of George Eastman and some very vibrant colored Post-it notes. I am joining today from Rochester, New York at the George Eastman Museum, and it is with gratitude and humility that I acknowledge that I am speaking on the ancestral homelands of the Seneca Nation, member of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, an alliance of 6 sovereign nations with a historic and contemporary presence on this land. During our time together, there are a few different ways that you can participate in the conversation. You can raise your hand in the Zoom call, and I'll call on you to unmute yourself. And please feel free to raise your hand at any point during my presentation. Feel free to stop me. I also invite you to type a question or a comment in the chat throughout. Towards the second half of the session, I want to foster and facilitate a bit of a discussion. And so either way of participating is good with me. I will also ask you to participate in a quick Zoom poll of 3 questions towards the end of the session. Last but not least, before I dive in, I also want to give thanks to our sponsors who generously support the MCN conference. So my objectives for our time together today are to share a bit about the Building Capacity Project and speak about some of the successes, challenges, and lessons learned in year 1. In doing so, my goal is to provide insights into capacity building on a large scale and to shed light on some of the ways New York State museums have been reaching their audiences virtually over the past year. I then want to use the remainder of our time to open up the conversation with your questions for me and some discussion questions about your own capacity building. My first thing that I want to talk about is what is building capacity. Building capacity, creating sustainability, growing accessibility is a 2-year IMLS CARES Act funded project running from fall of 2020 through the end of September 2022. And the project works towards 2 main goals. The first, to increase technological savviness and digital capacities of museum professionals through hardware, software, and training. And 2, to develop virtual and digital programs to engage communities and reach new audiences. On this slide, I list some of the specific support provided to project partners in 4 categories: hardware, software, training and support, and community. And over the course of 2 years, each partner museum will develop and deliver 2 digital programs or projects to their audiences. So we just wrapped up year 1 just a couple of weeks ago. It concluded at the end of September 2021, and we had a bit of a condensed first year, so it was 10 months. Over this 10-month period, the number of contact hours with project participants totaled 2,161. And this number was reached through a combination of one-to-one meetings, synchronous digital workshops and webinars, as well as in-person workshops. Who is building capacity? We began the project with 98 project partner organizations and 200 museum professionals, 2 individuals from each partner. Over the course of the first year, we've lost a number of project participants and partners and have welcomed new ones into the cohort. Currently, at the start of year 2, we are working with 97 museums and with 184 project participants. And we expect this number to continue to fluctuate over the next year. In the chat, I am providing links to both the project map, which is live, and the most current project partner list for you to peruse either during this presentation or later today. Our project partner organizations stretch across the state of New York within all 10 Red Sea regions. The cohort is diverse in the types of museums, content focus, staff size, age of organization, geographic location, among other factors. And our project participants also range in age, background, length of time in the field, and position in their organization. We're working with volunteers and board members, executive directors, curators, educators, people from all over museums. Honestly, I don't think I could do the cohort justice just by pulling out a couple of examples. So I invite you all to take a look at the project partner list and map when you get a chance. Before I move forward, I also want to acknowledge in the room with me are 9 of our project participants. I'm currently leading a 6-hour workshop in Rochester, New York. And so they've welcomed me into the space and allowed me to present here with them. So now that we've covered a little bit about what is building capacity and who is building capacity, I want to talk a little bit about the successes, challenges, and lessons learned from year 1. So over the past 10 months, we've seen incredible successes within the project, partner, and participant levels. These successes include building new digital skills, improving organizational practices, increasing interdepartmental collaboration and communication, reaching new audiences, telling new stories, and exploring new digital formats, among others. The first success I want to talk about, though, is about skill building. So on a project level, 145 out of 149 project participants that submitted a skill building survey as of October 1st self-reported building new skills as a result of the project. So it's about little over 97% of respondents. Now, from my perspective as a project fellow working with all of these individuals over the past year, I would argue that at least 3 of the 4 respondents that self-reported not building new skills have in fact done so, but just have not recognized this growth. And I could point out these individual skills. So I think we've seen incredible success in building new skills. We've also seen many of our project partners not only connect with their pre-existing audiences, but reach new ones through new formats and new stories. One project participant wrote, "It has been incredibly rewarding to find that not only did our traditional audiences stay with us during this transition, but that we were able to reach many other people who did not live locally and would otherwise not have been able to engage with our content." And many other responses from project participants reflected this sentiment, that they've been able to connect with people that are interested in their content, but might not live locally. A third big success has been increased internal communication and collaboration for project participants. In many cases, especially in larger sized museums, project participants have been working with a colleague in a different department and in effect breaking down silos of communication and practice. One participant noted, quote, "I got to collaborate with members of my organization who I do not normally work so closely with. I learned from how they structured their planning and managed their time, and I feel inspired going into the second year." People that have worked together for years now, finally getting the chance to work together and learn from each other, even within their same organization. Now, I could spend hours detailing the successes of each and every project participant and each partner organization, but for the interest of time, I want to turn our focus to some of the challenges faced on this project. Now, I'm going to focus on 3 main challenges, including participant turnover, time constraints and shifting priorities, and the wide range of starting abilities and site infrastructure. This is not an exhaustive list of challenges, but these challenges continue to pop up throughout the year and were quite prevalent. So participant turnover has continued to affect the project on a number of different fronts. At the project level, turnover has made it difficult to build and maintain a cohort environment for learning. And it has also meant that staff hours are put towards onboarding throughout the year. For our project partners, turnover has resulted in some cases in stalled projects, loss of institutional knowledge and skills, and the necessary reprioritization of projects that were led by their project participant. 38 participants have left the project in year one for a number of different reasons, which are listed on the screen, including transitioning jobs in their organization, leaving the museum field, going back to continue their studies, or just hiring a new staff that is more intricately invested in kind of this work. We are currently 15 participants below capacity, with 5 identified participants that are waiting to be onboarded and 10 that these slots are open and no replacement has been identified yet. And in total, 3 organizations have withdrawn from the project due to time and staffing constraints. The second big challenge has been shifting priorities and that effect on time. Shifting priorities have challenged both our project participants and the project as a whole in year one. Changing state guidelines on reopening, or that period that I like to call reopening, reclosing, reopening, reclosing, reopening, reclosing, and the continually changing environment of the pandemic across the state continue to affect the day-to-day workloads, project planning, and just staff capacity on a weekly basis. In many cases, this pulled individuals from fully engaging in the project. And in many cases, the first activity to drop off was engagement in the cohort as a whole. So they were still focused on their individual projects and project planning, but engagement with the 200 other project participants in many cases was not kind of a priority. And then we have the wide range of starting abilities and site constraints. And as I was putting together this presentation, I realized that I probably should have titled this session Building Capacity on 200 Timelines rather than 98. Because when we first met the cohort in December 2020, about 3 days after I joined the Museum Association of New York, we realized that the range of starting abilities for individuals was significantly broader than expected. This affected both our ability to successfully structure training opportunities for all ability levels, and left many project participants feeling overwhelmed with opportunities. It also strained project staff time and challenged the creation of a cohort learning atmosphere. Now, in addition to this wide range of starting abilities, sites across the state started the project in very different environments, and these constraints created internal and external challenges. So something like lack of internet access, no Wi-Fi, inability to connect a new device to their system, a lack of hardware or very outdated hardware, all affected their ability to fully participate on the grant. So we have some great successes, some serious challenges, but throughout all of this, we've learned a lot over the first year of this project. And I wanted to highlight 3 of these lessons today. I'm happy to share more, both in our discussion and also later if you'd like to reach out. So the first lesson learned was relative value of project areas. And I know that there's a lot of numbers on the screen, and I'll explain them in a minute. One of the questions we asked all of our project participants at the end of year 1 was to rank project areas from most valuable, number 1, to least valuable, number 5, based on their experience. So they weren't rating each individual project area on its own, but rather a relative value based on all 5. 40% of respondents ranked access to hardware and software as the most valuable aspect of the grant project. Simply getting hardware and software in their hands was the most important. 26% ranked number one was one-to-one meetings with me, the project fellow, and that individual guidance. And so seeing these two major project areas as being the most valuable to museum professionals in 2021, having access and then having that individual guidance. And I think that's an incredible lesson to be learned. We've also seen the least valued amongst the cohort. 51% of respondents ranked being part of a cohort as the least valuable amongst the 5. And a little bit more analysis needs to be done, but I'm looking towards that being correlated to some of the challenges that I previously mentioned about lack of time and these differing starting abilities. And then there's a lot of, one of the big lessons learned, which I've been doing a lot of work on, is acknowledging growth and confronting assumptions about the state of the field. This again ties into this challenge of this range of starting abilities. I first want to say I don't think we acknowledge our own growth nor the growth of others enough. And capacity building growth can often appear as very slow and incremental. But one of the big things I've learned is that from other perspectives, these changes are often perceived as fast and having a huge impact, like life altering. So acknowledging the distances people have traveled from their own perspective and from their own starting point is very important in bringing individuals along and in measuring individual success. Okay? I've heard this a number of times from many different project participants. We would not have pushed ourselves so far or so fast if it wasn't for this project. And I think it's important to acknowledge those experiences of others. And the third big lesson learned in year 1 is the deeper needs of the field that affect digital learning and program development. And these skills might not be digital. So project management and time management, communication skills and organization skills, and storytelling. For successful implementation, technological capacity and digital learning needs to be built on this strong foundation of skills. And in order to confront that and address some of these needs, we are working some of these trainings into our workshops, including the workshop we are facilitating today. So those are some of the successes, the challenges, and the lessons learned from year 1. It's hard to illustrate kind of the depth and the breadth of this project in an 18-minute period. But what I wanted to do now is take questions from you. We'll give about 10, 15 minutes for questions, things that sparked your interest that you want to know more about. And then I want to open up the conversation to some broader discussion about capacity building and what that looks like for you and your organizations. So does anyone have any questions for me about the Building Capacity project or year 1? Please feel free to raise your hand and I'll call on you to unmute, or you can type your questions in the chat. Any questions? No questions. Okay. So if there's no questions for me, I'm going to ask you some questions and we'll get the conversation started. Oh, yep, Sarah.
Hello. I just had a quick question. Could you speak a little bit more on your role or involvement in the program? You mentioned that you were a fellow, and so what does that mean exactly as far as this? So I was just trying to learn a little bit more about, what's this all about for you?
Yeah,
Thanks.
that's a great question. So Sarah asked about what my role is on this project as project fellow. So I was brought on to the Museum Association of New York in December 2020 to for this project. I do pretty much all of the day-to-day management of the project. So designing and facilitating trainings, meeting with project participants. So every other month, more or less, I run one-to-one meetings. And so I have about 98 meetings in the month to check on progress, provide feedback, provide one-to-one technology support. I also design and facilitate in-person workshops, design and evaluate or design and assess year 1 reports and year 2 reports to make sure that people are progressing on their timeline. And then kind of other duties as assigned, kind of general term of museum therapist, right? So being a problem solver, trying to find solutions to both technical issues as well as broader issues relating to the project. So I do a little bit of everything. I do have additional support in Manny on the project. So we have our project director, Megan, who provides some more kind of higher level support, and then grant administration and some additional duties are done by other staff at Manny. Great question, thank you. Did I see another hand up earlier? Any other questions for me? Just going back to the year 1 overview, Sarah, to provide a little bit more information. Most of those 2,100 contact hours were done by myself. So that includes, right, all of the regional meetings, all of the in-person workshops, site visits, virtual workshops, onboarding sessions, offboarding sessions, and a lot of emails. So I'm going to ask you a couple of questions. So we'll have, I'm going to launch a poll, and I'm going to ask everyone to respond to this question. The first question asks, have you learned a new digital skill over the past year? Yes or no? If you could take a minute and respond to that, that would be wonderful. Great. A lot of everyone's responded that they have built a new skill. Wonderful. And the second question that I want to ask you is, how do you learn best? And for this question, you can answer in a number of different ways. You can select all that apply: watching a video, reading instructions, listening to instructions, face-to-face learning, live virtual engagement, whether that's a webinar or a workshop, and then individual experimentation. I ask you to take a minute to respond to that question. I'm seeing a number of responses on watching a video, reading instructions, and individual experimentation. Great. Not so much with listening to instructions, face-to-face learning, or live in virtual engagement. Okay. And the third question that I'm going to ask you is, have you taught someone else a new digital skill over the past year? And this is multiple choice, so you can choose yes in person and yes virtually if both of those apply to you, or you could select no. So I'll give you a minute to respond to that question as well. Okay, we have 4 people that have taught someone else a new skill virtually, 1 person that's taught someone a new skill in person, and 1 person that has not taught someone else a new skill over the past year. Okay. Any last responses before I end this poll? Okay, that gives me a sense of kind of where we're at in this group, and hopefully provide some nice reflection for the next few minutes. I have a couple of questions to facilitate a discussion. Please feel free to unmute yourself and respond, or add something in the chat. But some of the questions that I wanted to pose, both for the last few minutes we have together, as well as after this session on Slack, or through individual conversation, is how do you balance the acquisition of new skills with the other areas of your work, which I know we all have a lot going on. The second question is, how do you bring others along with you at a speed that works for them when it comes to capacity building? And what are the bounds of capacity? What do we do when we hit those limits? Does anyone feel comfortable? If you feel comfortable, please unmute yourself or raise your hand, providing a response to one of these questions.
I actually have a question, excuse me, that isn't related to any of these questions,
Sure.
but it just took me a second to sort of formulate. How are you defining what the digital program is? Like, is there a standard thing, like it has to have X, Y, and Z features to it, or it has to be a certain, like, how do you know if somebody, like, what, or were there certain options to choose from or something like that?
So we are giving project partners more or less free rein to define where their priorities are at or what they want to explore. So I'll give a few examples. We have synchronous school programs, asynchronous school programs, virtual lectures, video series, asynchronous learning materials, audio projects like podcasts, audio guides for exhibitions, walking tours that are virtual. We've asked all of our project partners to identify an audience and identify a story they want to tell, and they choose almost the rest. I'm here to support and provide technical and content support, but other than that, that is up to them. Good question.
Yeah, a follow up to that. So, do they do people ever like need sort of any kind of leadership into, well, you can accomplish this way or that way or that way, right? Because if people don't already understand how to do that or understand like what tools are available.
Right. So part of that is my work through one-to-one meetings and through workshops of providing solutions, providing options, looking at models from the field, and doing some of that work together. And also looking at others from the cohort and seeing what they're working on to try to kind of improve some of that. But I do have to say, that's a great question. and it's something that I've struggled with a little bit. I will say, as being a fellow, I've had kind of jumped into the deep end with this. So trying to wrap my head around 98 organizations and the stories they tell and their collections. We are working with gardens, historic sites, historic houses, art museums, university museums, history museums, transportation, fire, everything and anything. And so for me, I'm leaning on the expertise and the priorities of each organization to say, how do we make this work for you? Because, for instance, we are working with historical societies that have no paid staff and are only open certain days of the week, or we're working with an executive director and a head of a department in education at a museum that is, in New York City and has the experience doing this, doing virtual programming for years now, right? And so trying to set those benchmarks across the cohort has been really challenging. Any other questions for me or any responses to some of the questions?
Yeah, hello, my name is Anna Mikhailova and I'm from Moscow, Russia. Many thanks for your presentation. I'd like to answer the first question about balance. So I'm currently studying a course about community management, and when I choose what to study, I really think about how I can implement this knowledge at my work. And I don't have any time, unfortunately, to study something beyond the scope of my work. So I try to divide all the course materials in a very small bits, which can be done, let's say, in maybe 10-15 minutes a day, and try to follow this schedule every day, but in very small steps. This helps me to track my own progress, see some small results, and be on track in general. And when I looking for other courses, I choose those which combine online and pre-recorded stuff, because it's very hard to follow online events. In my situation, I work remotely from home with a small child, and it's a challenge. Yeah, so that's how I try to find this balance. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Anna. And I think, right, finding those practical, right, figuring out what you're already doing and then building skills around how do I do this thing just a little bit better, or how do I, just improve what I'm already doing, rather than saying I want to learn everything and then afterwards figure out how do I apply that, right? And then have to create things for that. So definitely practical applications are important for that. Wonderful. Does anyone else want to jump into the conversation, either responding to one of the questions on the screen, or asking me a question about the Building Capacity project?
I'll share that I work at a university, and I have a dual appointment. And so on one side of my appointment, they're using all this type of software, and on this side of appointment, they're now using this other software. And so it's like, you get used to doing with one thing for a while, and then there's like this slow adoption of the university would really like everybody to use Microsoft Teams, and I don't like it. But I have to use it in one side of my appointment. So it is really the kind of like just learn as you go sort of thing, right? I can't be like, oh, what exactly does this whole entire tool do? Because I don't have time for that. Like, right. I'm in a situation where it's a split appointment, and I'm 50% here, 50% there, but everybody on those sides assumes that they have 100% of my time. Right. So yeah.
Right. So, right, again, learning what you absolutely need to know to get through the day and to operate efficiently, and then knowing, okay, that's out of my bounds of what I need to know. If I ever need to learn that moving forward, wonderful. But for right now, no, thank you. I think is a useful tool of saying there is someone else that knows more than me, and if I need to, I can lean on them. Wonderful. One thing I'll note when we're talking about starting abilities and how much kind of individuals are coming to this project knowing, we have project participants that have kind of graduate studies in graphic design that are working in the Adobe softwares and doing excellent work. And I have individuals that still struggling to log into a new email address and to check that email address and to utilize to share a document on Google Drive. And so when I say we have a wide range of starting abilities, that is kind of one example of what we're looking at with that. Great. Let's see. So I might wrap up just a couple of minutes early. If there's no additional questions for me, I want to say thank you to all of you for joining me today. And for those of you who participated, for those of you who participated in the polls, I really appreciate your time, your questions, and your insight. I hope that you will reach out to me, whether that's via email, on Twitter, on Slack, or on LinkedIn. I will unfortunately be unable to attend this afternoon's recap session. I have to head back to my in-person duties facilitating this other workshop. But I will be on Slack throughout the week to continue conversations with everyone. And I hope that this afternoon's recap session is a productive one. Please stay connected. And thank you all again. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.